With the recent release of Deadpool and Wolverine, the Fox X-Men cinematic universe has officially come to a close, which was made very clear by the end credits of the film. We'll definitely be seeing some of the characters from that world again, like X-23, Deadpool, and Wolverine, but don't expect another movie to come from that universe. Because of that, it only makes sense to discuss the final Fox X-Men franchise watch order, and a lot of the dates here don't really make sense. There's a lot of time jumping, a lot of time travel storylines. So I'm gonna have to explain a lot of that, especially with Deadpool and Wolverine, so stick with me. But welcome to Big Flick Energy, and let's get right into the timeline. While the first film to come out was X-Men in the year 2000, this watch order starts with the prequel film X-Men First Class. Set in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis, this film shows the origins of the X-Men. Charles Xavier, Professor X, and Eric Leshner, Magneto, start as friends working together to stop Sebastian Shaw, a mutant who aims to trigger a nuclear war. The movie ends with the rift between Charles and Eric, leading to the formation of the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants. The mutants in this film include Mystique, Havoc, Beast, Banshee, Angel, Darwin, and more. In this movie, when Charles and Eric are recruiting new mutants to join their team, they do come across Logan, otherwise known as the eventual Wolverine, with his titular movie up next, X-Men Origins Wolverine. This film explores Wolverine's backstory, starting in 1845 when his mutant powers first manifest. It follows his life through various wars and his relationship with his brother Victor Creed, otherwise known as Sabretooth. We'll also meet Wade Wilson, the eventual Deadpool. The story culminates in 1981, where Logan is manipulated into the Weapon X program, resulting in the infusion of adamantium into his bones as he truly becomes the Wolverine, with his iconic claws. We're reintroduced to him with 2000's X-Men, where at this point, mutants are publicly known and society is divided on how to deal with them. Professor X leads the X-Men to protect humanity and mutants alike, while Magneto pursues more aggressive methods. The X-Men must stop Magneto from turning the world's leaders into mutants. The mutants in this film include Mystique, Jean Grey, Toad, Rogue, Sabretooth, Cyclops, Storm, and more. Now, 3 years later is the sequel to the film, X2 X-Men United. So it follows the events of the first film. The X-Men face a new threat from Colonel William Stryker, who seeks to destroy all mutants. The X-Men are forced to team up with Magneto to stop Stryker and save the mutant race. The mutants in this film include Nightcrawler, Iceman, Pyro, Deathstrike, Colossus, Kitty Pryde, Jubilee, Beast, Jean Grey, Rogue, Cyclops, and Storm. It deepens the conflict between mutants and humans, expands on Wolverine's backstory with the introduction of Stryker, and sets up the Phoenix storyline, which comes to fruition in X-Men The Last Stand, taking place 3 years later in 2006. Here, the discovery of a cure for mutation causes tensions between humans and mutants to rise. Meanwhile, Jean Grey is resurrected as the Dark Phoenix, leading to catastrophic consequences. The X-Men must confront both the threat of the cure and Jean's immense power. This film concludes the original X-Men trilogy, resolving the Phoenix storyline and bringing significant changes to key characters. We also see the deaths of some major characters like Cyclops and Professor X, but we later find out that he did not die in this movie, and his presence will be felt coming up very soon. Now, the mutants in this film included Iceman, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, Rogue, Wolverine, Cyclops, Beast, Storm, and some others. This film is directly followed by The Wolverine. Here, Logan is struggling with the loss of Jean Grey, another character that died in that movie, and his own mortality. He is drawn to Japan, where he faces new enemies and must confront his own vulnerabilities and mortality. It sets the stage for the eventual events of Days of Future Past, by showing Wolverine at a point of emotional and physical exhaustion. Before this film, though, we have the only show in the Fox X-Men franchise with The Gifted. Set in a world where mutants are persecuted, The Gifted follows the Strucker family as they discover their children are mutants. They join an underground network of mutants fighting for survival against a government agency. The mutants in this show include Blink, Polaris, Thunderbird, Ahab, Shatter, Sage, Dreamer, Eclipse, and the Strucker children. This sets the stage for a world where the mutants are being hunted with the film X-Men Days of Future Past, taking place in 2023 in a dystopian future where I guess at this point it's not really the future since that was last year, but this is a dystopian version of that year where Sentinels hunt mutants and humans. Wolverine is sent back to 1973 to prevent the assassination of Bolivar Trask, the creator of the Sentinels, by Mystique. Now, he's sent back by a group of mutants, which is led by Professor X, who, as I mentioned before, did not die in Last Stand. The mission is ultimately successful, and through this timeline change, everything after 1973 before this film is erased and a new timeline is born. That means the projects The Gifted, The Wolverine, Last Stand, X2, X-Men, and all events in X-Men Origins Wolverine, which happened after 1973, are now erased. The only events in this world to remain are the events of X-Men First Class and X-Men Origins Wolverine events before 1973. So with this, the new timeline continues in the year 1983 with X-Men Apocalypse. The film follows the awakening of the first mutant, Apocalypse. He recruits powerful mutants, including a young Storm, Angel, Psylocke, and Magneto, to cleanse the Earth as his 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. The X-Men, led by young Professor X, must stop him. The mutants in this film include Jubilee, Blob, Caliban, Havoc, Beast, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Quicksilver, Nightcrawler, Mystique, and Wolverine. And let me just say, Quicksilver in this movie and in the previous movie, Days of Future Past, such a great character that it's such a shame what ended up happening with him in WandaVision. Really wish that we could have gotten that version of Quicksilver in the MCU, but who knows, maybe eventually. But 9 years later, we see the return of the X-Men in X-Men Dark Phoenix, where we start to see how similar this new timeline is to the old one, with the presence of Jean Grey once again becoming the Dark Phoenix, just a couple of years earlier in 1992. The film follows the X-Men as they face their most formidable enemy yet, one of their own, Jean Grey. After a mission in space, Jean is hit by a mysterious cosmic force that amplifies her powers, turning her into the Dark Phoenix. The X-Men must save both Jean and the world from her immense power. It concludes the main storyline of the X-Men in this new timeline, and in a way, it concludes the quadrilogy of X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, and now Dark Phoenix. And for some time, this film was actually considered the last film in this universe. And we'll get into what the other last films in this universe were later, but for now, we move on to Fantastic Four in the year 2015, otherwise known as Fantastic. Now, this film was never actually established as part of the main Fox X-Men universe, but 2 things lead me to believe it is connected. First, Deadpool 2 actually originally included the Thing from Fantastic, who would have had a brawl with Juggernaut in the film, but he was later removed from its final cut. Why was he removed? Well, it might have been that Fantastic was a horrible movie. Or maybe he just didn't fit into the story. But I'm going to say that it was just because it wasn't a good movie. Honestly, that was probably the most disappointing movie I've seen in theaters outside of Madam Web. But Madam Web wasn't really that disappointing. I don't think anybody thought that would be good. But enough with my rant about Fantastic. So, second off, with all of the cameos and Easter eggs in Deadpool and Wolverine, they easily could have had the Fantastic Four from Fantastic show up, or at least one character, but they chose not to. Personally, I think it would have been pretty funny if they had shown Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch right after having shown us Chris Evans as the Human Torch. It could have been Deadpool just recognizing, wait a second, you're also from the MCU. I thought you had died there. And then he also turns into the Human Torch, and then Deadpool just starts having a running joke where he assumes everybody's going to be the Human Torch. So I think that could have been pretty funny, but they chose not to. They chose to not have any of them show up. Maybe because the world they were from hadn't been pruned yet to send them to the void. Maybe that's because their world was the same world as Deadpool's, as was originally planned, with the Thing showing up in Deadpool 2. With that though, this reboot of the Fantastic Four franchise follows 4 young outsiders who gain superpowers after a teleportation experiment goes wrong. They must use their powers to prevent the destruction of Earth by a former friend turned enemy, Doctor Doom. And not Robert Downey Jr. Doctor Doom, but whatever that version of Doctor Doom was. A year later, we have Deadpool in 2016. A spin-off from the X-Men films, Deadpool follows the story of Wade Wilson, a former Special Forces operative who, after being subjected to an experiment that leaves him with accelerated healing powers, trying to cure his cancer, he becomes the wisecracking anti-hero Deadpool. The film is set in the X-Men universe and features appearances by X-Men characters like Colossus, who later becomes Deadpool's best friend. 2 years later, we have its sequel, Deadpool 2, in 2018. Here, Deadpool assembles a team of mutants, including the X-Force, to protect a young boy named Russell from Cable, a time-traveling cyborg. And this is the second time where time is gonna start not making a lot of sense in this world. First, we had X-Men Days of Future Past, which completely changed the timeline. And get ready for Deadpool 2, because it changes things again. So, this film delves into themes of family and redemption and expands more on the X-Men universe by introducing more mutants, including the new timeline's Juggernaut, who sadly did not return in Deadpool and Wolverine because the character design in this movie was amazing. We also get a tease of Professor X's School of Mutants and see some of the characters from the franchise come together in this Easter egg. By the end of the film, we also get to see the return of the evil Deadpool from X-Men Origins Wolverine, and the return of Logan himself in this same scene. 8 years later, set in 2026, we have New Mutants, which was a film that had a lot of delays because it was about to come out at the time that Disney had bought Fox, and eventually Disney released it, and it, for a very long time, was thought to have been the last film in this world. But we know that's not true. So this film follows a group of young mutants held in a secret facility against their will. They must face their fears and discover the truth about their powers while trying to escape. While it is a standalone horror thriller, New Mutants is set in the Fox X-Men universe and introduces a new generation of mutants to this world. At this point, mutants are almost entirely gone from the world, and we continue to see this in the film Logan in 2029, so 3 years after New Mutants. It follows an aging Wolverine as he cares for an ailing Professor X on his deathbed. Logan reluctantly helps a young mutant, Laura, otherwise known as X-23, escape from a sinister organization. The film ends with Logan's death, marking the end of his journey and serving as the final chapter in his story, as what we will soon find out means the death of Earth 10005's anchor being. And it also served at the end of the X-Men universe. Or so we thought, because this takes us to the true end of the Fox X-Men watch order with the recently released Deadpool and Wolverine. In this film, we'll see Deadpool go to the TVA originally introduced to us in Loki and find out the truth of what the death of Logan means to his world, as he was this world's anchor being, which, as was described in the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, means the world begins to slowly die when its anchor being has died. Now, for the anchor being storyline, apparently what Marvel was initially planning to do for Avengers Kang Dynasty, which has now been scrapped and it's been replaced by Avengers Doomsday, with, as I mentioned before, Doctor Doom being played by Robert Downey Jr., the original plan was a ton of the anchor beings from different worlds were going to unite together to take on the Army of Kangs, or the Council of Kangs. And among those were going to be Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, Hugh Jackman Wolverine, and then the MCU's anchor being was apparently going to be Tom Holland Spider-Man, which I wasn't the biggest fan of that idea, but it would have been really cool to have seen all those characters face off against the Kangs together. Sadly, we won't get that, but who knows what they end up doing with Avengers Doomsday. But with that, with Deadpool finding out that the anchor beam for his world died and it is going to result in the death of his world, he goes on a journey to find the new Wolverine from the multiverse to become his world's new anchor beam. The only problem with the premise of this film is that the story takes place, as it says on screen, 6 years after Deadpool 2. Deadpool 2 took place in 2018, which means this movie takes place in the year 2024. But with Logan taking place in 2029, how does this make any sense at all? Well, we have to recognize that time works differently in the TVA. That's a huge factor that they had mentioned to us within the series Loki. And we also have to recognize that Deadpool breaking the fourth wall is what gives him the knowledge of what happened to Wolverine, which is why even in Deadpool 2 taking place in 2018, Deadpool knows it happened as seen when he brings out the Logan toy. The way that Deadpool's fourth wall breaking works is he knows everything that we know. If we don't know something, he doesn't know it either. He can't tell us what's going to happen in the next movie that hasn't come out, but even if his movie takes place a couple years before Logan, he still knows exactly what happened to Logan. So that's how Deadpool makes sense here. But what doesn't make sense next is that X-23 was in the void in this film, even though we know that her world wasn't pruned because her world is the same world as Deadpool. So what scenario led to her eventually getting pruned and sent to the void? In my opinion, the only logical conclusion is that the X-23 from the void isn't the one we saw in Logan at all, and is a different one from a similar universe. Now, another factor of the timeline that doesn't make much sense with this is that by the end of the movie, we go back to 2024 and Deadpool has befriended the multiverse version of Wolverine and X-23. It's a great end to the movie, but if you think about it, it means that in the year 2024 in that world, there are 2 Logans and 2 X-23s alive. I do have a theory on how this can actually have caused the events of Logan, but that's a video for another day. For now though, and probably forever, this is the complete watch order for the Fox X-Men universe. It had some great moments, it had some not so great moments, but it also helped kickstart the success of the superhero genre to a point nobody could have anticipated, and a point that kickstarted my career on YouTube. So with that, thank you for watching this video. Please comment down below your favorite film in this world, if you believe that Fantastic belong here, and what the timeline issues with Deadpool and Wolverine could mean. Thank you to Fox for all the great times and all the great moments watching all of your films, not just the X-Men films, not just the superhero films, but just all your films. Stay tuned for my next video on how Deadpool and Wolverine may have caused Logan, and see you all next time on Big Flick Energy.